John and I will do a first presentation, like maybe 5 minutes, just to tell you what is our work and how we see it. But we really intend this session to be really open for you and for you to ask questions. So please ask questions, otherwise I'll start asking you questions, or John will. So you'll still be stuck with us. And you can, my name is Marc-Olivier, but just call me Marco, which is simpler.
So yeah, and I would reiterate, I would hope you would keep your microphones off and you would interrupt us when you have questions and you would ask us the things that you want to know, because quite clearly, otherwise we're just going to talk about things we want to talk about, and that wouldn't be helpful to you at all. But I will start. I'm a columnist in Alabama and have been for quite a while. And I was intrigued by the name of this panel because, it's all about finding your voice. And I always, and that's something that's been pretty important to me, because they told me that too all my life, when I was young, growing up in this business, that, you need to find your voice. And I'm like, what are you even talking about? What does that even mean? And when I first started in this business, I sat by this guy. He was actually a Nieman fellow at one time, and but after that, his name is Rick Bragg, and he has some issues in other ways, but he can turn a phrase better than anybody I've ever met in my life, and has gone on to win a Pulitzer for feature writing and a number of best-selling books, and did have to sort of leave the New York Times in disgrace, but that's another story. But when I was sitting beside him, all I could see was the fact that he could turn a phrase better than anybody I've ever seen in my life. And so it just sucked up all the oxygen in the room, and everybody wanted to write like Rick. And I was included, for years, I wanted to write like Rick. So I tried to write like Rick, which I don't sound like Rick, and I don't write like Rick. And it would be impossible for me to write like Rick. And yet, and in best case scenario, if I succeeded, I would be a cheap imitation of Rick. So eventually I just stopped sort of wanting to sound like somebody else. And I never trusted that voice inside my head that always told me, what would come out of my fingers when I typed, and it told me to, to say whatever comes to my mind, because I didn't ever believe that voice was worth listening to, that I needed to find somebody else that I could emulate or imitate. But the, 4 or 5 years passed, and all of a sudden I realized, that I was writing, started listening to this voice that was telling me what to do. And all of a sudden people started to respond to what I was doing. And I began to write like I thought. And then I began even later to write what I thought, when I started writing, opinion. But, and then it dawned on me one day that that's just what they mean when they're talking about voice. It's just finding a way to trust that voice in your head that is and I have come to believe it is if not the only thing, one of the only things we have that are unique in all the world. And if you're going to write opinion, that's what you want, because you never want to emulate the thoughts of somebody else who's writing opinion. You want, if you have something to offer, it is strong opinion that you believe and that you can back up with your research and your reporting and your facts and your knowledge and your experiences and the people you talk to and those things. And we can talk more about technique if you want. We can talk more about tools. We can talk about all those things in a minute. But that's just my take on voice, and I'll turn it back over to Marco. Or, and again, y'all do not be shy. I know you're not going to be, so just interrupt anytime you want. You're on mute, Marco. I thought we decided that nobody was going to be on mute, but nobody follows the rules.
It's
because they're journalists.
What I was going to say is that the John has given us the perspective of a columnist. So like 3 times a week, he has to have an opinion and sometimes something to say. Something I don't do, and I'm pretty happy that I don't have to. an op-ed editor. So I get to call people and ask them to write. So I have to be aware of who's got a voice, or who could have be a voice, or who should be given a voice, which is another way to do stuff. Just before we start, I'd like to go over what op-ed pages are for, what are their function or purpose, because it helps us understand where we want this voice to be heard if we try to write for a newspaper. Because of course, if you write for a newspaper, it's not the same thing as if you try to write a book or something else, anything like that. So the op-ed pages are there to give more depth to the news, to focus maybe less on the facts, but on their interpretation. Doesn't mean that you can, write about anything, anything that comes through your mind. You still have to stick to the facts, but you try to think of them in a more elaborate way than just simply reporting. I'm not saying that to say that reporting is less important. I'm just saying that it's not the same kind of work. Interpretation can be many things. It can be made on the basis of your personal experience, on the basis of some expertise, or it can be historical, it could be political, it could be philosophical. Like different perspectives can be applied to interpret the news. The trick when you're an op-ed editor like me is to find the most relevant perspective related to the facts and the timing. Because of course, you don't want to rush to interpretation. You have to have some sense of the basic facts before you can really interpret them. For example, in Paris, as you know, in the last years, we've had a wave of terrorist attacks. And for sometimes we didn't know really what was happening. There were rumors going around. There was a lot of uncertainty. And before you rush to conclusion and say, haha, well, this happened because of this and that, you have to wait. What you can do in the first time when such events happen is just to relate the emotion of being in the feeling of being in a city where such things happen. You cannot really go into thinking about why it happened. You can go into the kind of the feeling of insecurity, of the sense of loss, for example, you feel because of what seemed to be a normal neighborhood now seems to be so strange under these circumstances after the attacks, as I said. So there are different kind of opinions that you can write, or different kind of op-ed pieces that can be written different based on the timing. So it's really important to not forget that, because if you, as I said, if you rush to too narrow interpretation of the facts as they are still unfolding, it is very dangerous, and it's generally not advised, at least for me. That's my opinion. And you also have to remember that opinions are based on fact. There's still reporting that needs to be done. You have to check your information. You have to call people. You have to really understand people, unless you are a scholar, and then it's your work, and then you, on the basis of what you have done and the research that you have done, you are able to say, well, this and that, where my findings were based on my findings, I'm able to tell you this and that about what happened. And it is also important to note that style is important in terms of writing for op-ed pages. Like when you have a formidable, like an amazing writer, like the man John talked about, this is really important. It changes everything. You're not like, I don't want to say anything bad about journalists, but I don't want to just read journalists. And so it's important to have also on the op-ed pages to have a kind of a respiration, like a breath of fresh air. It's more open. It's less to the point, like journalistic writing. But that said, however, not everybody writes with amazing prose. It's not my case. able to write correctly, but I try to write convincingly. I'm not sure I'm such a stylist, and this is fine. And and so we should not overvalue the notion of voice. I think sometimes it's as if, I think it's sometimes, for me, sometimes this notion is overblown. Writing correctly and being able to write convincingly is already all right. It's not easy writing. And also another key aspect of the op-ed pages is to create to an open debate, to be open to each side, to each community of the society. So pluralism is really important. And so to fit in the op-ed pages, you have to find where you stand on different issues, where you stand also within society, and it gives you an insight into what could be your voice and what you can bring to the op-ed pages. But having simply an opinion is not enough. We don't want, like for Le Monde, we don't want what we call a commentaire or simply comments on the news. We want something a bit more meaty, if I can say. And if you're going to write for the op-ed pages, you have to develop a thick skin, to be ready to expose yourself. You're a bit like a novelist, you're spilling your guts in front of everybody, and you're going to be faced with tough criticism. I guess that John has faced that. And so if you're going to write for the op-ed pages, your voice also has to be that the choice to expose yourself. And an op-ed can be generally written in a really basic way, which is 2/3 of the article. You make an analysis of what is happening, and in the last third part of the op-ed, you make a proposition. You say, well, we could fix the problem this way. This is how most scholars, experts, think tanker write. It's interesting, but it's not always really the most interesting kind of or the most sexy kind of articles. There are also moments where you need a more personal account, as I said, to like something you could ask a writer, a novelist to do, because we're not just simply dealing with problems that need to be solved, but also with events that provoke emotions. And so being able to name them, express them is a great job. And voila. So this was my little presentation, and now the floor is yours.
Well, I'm only offended by 10% of what you said, so that's good. But it reminds me, I had an editor once who wrote this milquetoast column every week that nobody read. And I remember one time he sent me one of his columns to read for accuracy, because that's been something I had been covering. And I went to him and I said, if you say this with more clarity or sharpen your sword a little bit, and use more active verbs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, this will be a lot stronger. And he said, and I quote, "Stronger is not what I'm going for." And why are you writing it is what I want to know, because this is opinion writing. So don't come at me without an opinion. And while Marco's right that op-ed pages need to be to have a wide range of views, pick your view when you're going to write a column individually. I mean, if you don't have an opinion, don't write an opinion column. Mm-hmm. And you see it a lot. And I've been in the archives a lot in the last few years doing research on many things that included the role of editorial pages across the South in the civil rights movement, the American South. And over again, I would run into these columns, these newspaper voices that would say, it might be this, or on the other hand, it might be that. And, we should do this, but maybe we should do something else, which is the absolute worst thing you can do. I mean, it's the equivalent of saying nothing.
Yeah.
And it's and in those cases, it's in the face of widespread injustice. It's a part of this whole conspiracy of silence, a way to pretend to speak out about something while at the same time saying nothing at all.
And I don't see journalism as a form of entertainment, but that doesn't mean, like, it's austere, but it doesn't have to be boring.
I would disagree in some measure. It's because I write a column every day. I think it's very important. If I'm going to try to convince somebody of something, I will show them facts, and I will also attempt to give them entertainment at some point, because you guys know how difficult it is to maintain anyone's attention these days, whether you're talking about columns, whether you're talking about stories, whether you're talking about TV shows or movies or anything. As soon as you get bored with it, you are gone, and I am gone. And so I have a firm belief that you have got to, every paragraph has to lead them into a place that they want to go. And that every paragraph has to reward them with something, whether it's a fact they didn't know, whether it's a statistic that is interesting to them, whether it is reporting that is unique, whether it is an entertaining paragraph or a nice turn of phrase, whether it could be any of those things. But we have to, I think it was Roy Peter Clark who talked about, who's a great writing instructor, who talked about, leaving gold coins for people along the way. And, and it used to be every couple of graphs, but if you have one boring, poorly written paragraph, people are going to leave, and you could have the most brilliant conclusion in the bottom half of this column in the whole wide world, and it does not matter, because they will not get there. And so it is a firm philosophy of mine. And I don't call it entertainment, Marco, but we have to reward them with things that if not entertain them, then sustain them to get to the bottom. And if I have to use jokes to do that, I will do that, because the goal, I will do that anyway, but the goal is for them to read. And if you tell them something they don't like and you can make them laugh at the same time, then they'll read it again, even if they don't like it. So, part of it, again, I write every other day. And so part of that to me is cultivating an audience that won't be, and what Marco said about thick skin is right. You better have it, because you can write anything in the world, and half of the people are going to tell you you're an idiot, and half the people are going to tell you you're a genius, and you can't believe either one of them. And so, go ahead,
John. I'm sorry, but let's hear these people, please.
This is just a thought, but during my first year with the Crimson, I helped conduct their readership survey, and for like all Crimson content, like including opinion content, I realized that one stat was that people are looking at the pages for like 30 seconds. And I think learning that made me realize like, oh crap, like you were saying, John, like you have to make each sentence like delicious is the word that I think of. Like each sentence has to be a reason to read the next sentence. And then hopefully you play that game until people get to the end. And that's like, as I've transitioned, I still write, but as I've transitioned to like, proofing and editing all of the opinion content that we publish, like, that's the game that I play until the end of the piece. And I found that that's like my editor, mindset. And I think that's, I don't know, really good insight.
We should try to aim for that, but and that's something I tell to the people who write for us, that they have to remind themselves while writing that they might be, the person reading the article might be in the metro and being pushed by his neighbor and who's trying to get out. And so to keep the people's attention, you have to make sure, like, not to use jargon, to try to write in a way that can be understood by everybody, that we're talking to a general audience, and so just those things are already really important. Just when you commission, when you're asking a journalist knows those things, but a scholar might not, he's or less trained into that. So you also, when you commission, you have also to take people where they are.
And when you're writing an opinion and you're trying essentially to convince someone of someone, it's easy to come off as preachy or as somehow superior. And I think all of those things come into play. If they feel like initially they're being preached at, they're going to be gone.
Yeah.
And so if you can use people to tell those stories, if I can talk about you, Hannah, in some way that represents the greater journalism world, for instance, and you have a story that can represent those people, that's wonderful. And vice versa, if we look at 10,000 feet and then see how that affects people down below, this ladder of distraction, as we would call it. I mean, to tell those stories through other people is often really good. And the whole use of, there's so many ways to do that are not straightforward through, to tell people without being preachy, to use, parable or myth or you may, a subtlety sometimes works. Just employ all these tools in your toolbox and constantly think of different ways to tell stories, and not to be, know the rules, but don't be restricted by them. And
I always feel that when I take a moralistic turn where writing a piece, I failed. Never scold people or never scold even the establishment. It's just boring. Jump in, you have a question?
I think both of you kind of touched on this, the difference between hard news or hard news journalism, and the way, you guys hear me, sorry. So somebody who's a journalist by trade trying to transition to op-ed might be difficult because you're used to writing in a certain way, a certain structure. And then when you're trying to write something in op-ed, it's almost like an oil and water situation. And for students in particular, we're often dealing with people who don't have a journalistic background to begin with. So oftentimes you'll have somebody who doesn't know how to write journalistically because they haven't been taught that structure, and they'll get kind of sifted over to op-ed because they don't know how to do the hard news stuff without the, what I think is foundational part of journalism that helps you do better on the op-ed side. But I guess my question would be, how do you guys feel about that transition?
that's a good question. And I was in hard news for 20 years before I got a column writing gig, which was a long time ago now too. But it was really hard for me to make that transition because I felt so strongly that everything should be based on hard reporting, on data, on and I still do think the best columns I write are based on really serious reporting. But being able to loosen up and have an opinion was, I was hardcore hard news at the time. I didn't even vote because I thought it was a conflict of interest. So, and then all of a sudden you're telling me that my opinion is worth something for people to hear, which was a contrast to everything I'd ever represented in the business. And it seemed insane. And it took me several years, I think, to really to get to where I was comfortable with my opinion. But that came after, it came with writing columns that were based on, data and fact and reporting and a lot of experience in it. The idea that people can step in and write op-ed is a fairly new, you used to have to, it used to be a lot more rare that people came in and wrote directly opinion, but it's a different world in every way now, and there's opportunity to do that. I just hope people, when they do that, will make it a point to learn the basics and need to be taught the basics of ethics and reporting and data and all of the tools that go into making a good op-ed.
in making this transition, we also have to trust the institution where we are. Like being a journalist for whatever page is not that complicated. Even though like nowadays you have to have a very long resume even before applying, you know. Like it used to be a job that everybody does because they don't have any training into whatever else. And so it still is true, you know, this is a basic job that everybody with a little bit of judgment can do and be decent and good at it, you know. And you know, the institution will take care of you. It will, you will learn, your peers will help you. Like this is one of the foundational thing about journalism. It's teamwork. We do it together. There's a whole chain of production, and each piece of the chain will help you, correct you along the way, and you'll understand how it fits, how it's done. And so when I started, like the things I had a bit more difficulty with when I started at Le Monde was writing book reviews, because you're talking to really kind of readers who know their stuff. So you have to find the right balance, but also you have to be critical. And so I had too much admiration for the author of the book. So I had to find the good balance between saying, well, this is good, well, this is, well, this place in the book is, you know, more. And that I found more problematic. But, you know, your colleagues are sometimes not pleasant people, but most of the time they're nice people and just there to help you, and they'll help you make the transition. But again, this is not a job that needs to be, that is so complicated to do. It should, like, I really don't like this transition of, like, this transformation of the job where you have to be such a specialist before even entertaining the idea of switching to it.
I know there's a question there, but I don't feel, I mean, we're in very different places, although Marco's from Paris and I'm from Birmingham, the Paris of Alabama, but you know, the special, I mean, I'm so much less specialized now than I was when I started this because of the change in the business, which I hated at first because I wanted, you know, I had a natural instinct to not want to change. But I mean, the ability to use video and audio podcasts and any means necessary to tell, to create a virtual op-ed was awakening for me. I mean, and we're talking here about print, but opinion comes in all forms, and anybody that goes into that with the intent of making it a career needs to understand all of those elements and to be open to stepping into whatever environment it requires. That doesn't mean you have to give up the writing part of it, certainly. And that's the part that I love the most. But it's sort of freeing to realize that when we talked earlier about, and again, when I've struggled, I mean, the worst thing in the world is when you have to write a column every 2 days and you're struggling to figure out what to write about and you don't know. And the more you think about it, the more you can't think of it. But having the, you know, opening up yourself to all these different ways to tell stories is so incredibly freeing because it just makes you look at things in bigger ways, and it helps you to come up with those story ideas as well. But sorry, I think I know.
Let's see your
question.
Isabella.
Yeah, thanks so much. I guess, like, as someone who is kind of coming from a more hard news background, or that's just kind of what I do in my newsroom. It's really interesting to hear about, you know, kind of the opposite of what I'm trained to do, which is kind of, you know, this always to be intentional about neutrality and trying to kind of, you know, excise your voice from the reporting as opposed to, you know, kind of incorporate it in there. And so it's been really fruitful to listen. And I think my question is like, at least for me, like the nature of an opinion is that it shifts, right? You know, you can't know everything, like as Mark, you were saying, as, you know, the situation develops or things get more complicated, perhaps your thoughts change. So I guess like, but like you're also, you know, opining on situations that are dynamic and that are shifting. So like, when do you know like that you feel confident to like, even if this situation changes or there are certain ramifications in the future, I'm going to put this opinion out there? And like, you know, when do you feel confident enough to just throw it out there and do that?
John, go
I
ahead.
can answer that because I deal with it a lot, because when you have a deadline to write a column and you don't have the ability to wait and see what the most important event in your readership is going to mean in the long run, you have to come, I think, to terms with the fact that you will say it given what you know, and you will make an effort to know all you can know, and you will say it in that moment with the very best of intention. You have to have confidence that you're saying the right thing with the right information that you have, and you know as well that you will say things wrong sometimes. Mm-hmm. And when you say things that are wrong sometimes, you should go back and write to correct them, and to say that you were wrong, and to if you have better thoughts about it, to elaborate on them, to build on them, because it's a living, breathing thing, this opinion world that we're in, and don't take ourselves, I mean, I take myself very seriously in that I think what I do is important, and I think that what I can offer my readers is necessary. But as soon as we start to take ourselves too seriously and think that, challenged if we're wrong about something, if that starts to eat us up, that's a poison. Because we have to understand that we're going to be wrong, or that we're going to say the wrong thing, or that we're not going to say the right thing at the right time. And we have to be willing to acknowledge that, and never believe that what we say on one occasion is the be all end all about anything. And the best, and in terms of, I'll let Marco talk about that before I digress.
Like this, you have to wait from some basic facts to be there. Again, like the example I gave of terrorist attacks is pretty clear for me, or mass shooting here as often, too often has happened too often in America. So you really have to have the basic facts really before you say, well, the cause of the attack is this and that. You have an attack, but you don't know what propelled it. Before you try to go into that, you should wait a little bit but then you also have to allow yourself to be wrong, otherwise you'll just shut up, and if you're asking people to write as I do, you're asking them to take a risk, as I said, they have to have a thick skin and to be able to take it, and to be able to expose themselves, because the ideas are not just theoretical thing, it's something that you hold dear. And so there are feelings into ideas. And so even if they are scholarly and very profoundly studied and all that. But when you ask people to write, you've made a choice, you've made your research, that this person is able to make that kind of assumptions, and to take that kind of risk to go into this area. It's not, so it's a calculated risk, and so it's different because there's expertise.
And obviously what Marco and I do are very different things,
Mm-hmm.
and we have very different, goals in what we do. And so for me, if for instance, the governor of Alabama, we get news that he's or she is under investigation, and we can confirm that. We don't know everything. We don't know all, we're never going to know all those things. So what's important, I have no choice in that situation but to write something about that. I do have to be very concerned and very aware of what I know and what I don't know. And so when I write that column, I write within the confines of what I know and what I know historically and what I, I don't write a supposition. I don't write what ifs. I write within the things that we know and what the possible outcomes could be.
You just have, sorry, John, but you have to to be aware of what you can write in time 1, in time 2, in time 3. Like
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah. Sorry, John. So
no, you go ahead. I'm done.
Well, that's just it. And so, Aidan, please go ahead then.
I think Hannah moved it before me if she's ready to go.
Oh, okay.
I've already talked a bit, so you can go ahead.
Thank you. Marco, earlier you said that pluralism is really important as far as op-ed pages go, and I've kind of seen 3 different strains of pluralism. There's one which says that if an idea is believed by enough people, then it kind of deserves a spot at the table for people to talk about it. There's another form which kind of says that there are many different correct answers that people can arrive at rationally, and that it's good to understand all these different perspectives so that we can tolerate them and maybe convince each other. And then there's another form which kind of says that a multitude of opinions leads to debate, which results in like a singular or really a finite amount of correct answers, so that the debate eventually leads to one correct answer as opposed to the debate leading to multiple correct answers. So I was wondering which form of pluralism you were kind of talking about, because that kind of determined what kind of content you put on the editorial, on the op-ed pages.
Well, there's another form of pluralism, which is that pluralism is fun. It's surprising. If you have always the same ideas, like let's say, there's no surprise, there's no surprise when you always have the same ideas on the page. So you're like preaching then. And some newspaper prefer to go that way. I don't find it really fun, and so I'm really happy to publish people on the right. These are not my ideas, but whatever. I really enjoy it just to be pushed and just to be surprised. I think it's fun. And the second thing I would say that I don't think that pluralism is, well, in the liberal theory, pluralism is indeed serve the purpose of trying to find at least a form of consensus and all that. Newspaper are not there to build consensus. We're there to help foster an open debate. Like we could say that I'm serving France by building up the general possibility of critique, but I'm not helping France into solving anything. I'm not solution oriented. So that's not the form of pluralism that is the form of pluralism to which I abide is really the openness and also the tolerance, because if we're just are between ourselves, then it turns into orthodoxy. And I would not say that it has like, oh, if this idea has enough support, then it has legitimacy. The legitimacy to express yourself in our pages is, for example, the far-right candidate in France, Marine Le Pen, writes regularly for has written on more than one occasion for the New York Times and Op-Ed. We wouldn't publish an Op-Ed, even of Marine Le Pen, even though like she's the leading candidate at the moment. We would publish a question and answer with her, a Q&A, because there's pushback from a journalist. it's not the same thing, you know. So it's not enough to have to be popular enough, you know, to be to have a place in our pages. That's not how we do things. Yeah.
What does determine validity for you? What are the criteria you use? Like what is enough to get accepted?
That's right.
There are no rules. I'm sorry, there might be some background noise. My kids are in the house and traveling around, so I'm getting a message. So that's why I'm telling you. Sorry for the noise. I hope it's not too much. Validity. I don't know. It's like there's no rule, but really, like, and if you make a rule as a newspaper, you find out that, well, in the end, you're not respecting it. Like when you do this every day, like it goes fast, and there's always a complicated situation that comes up. So it's you may have some principles, you know. So pluralism is a principle, you know. It's at that level, but. And then the rule, as I said, one of the rules that we have is that far-right candidates or far-right voices, it's never open bar op-ed. An op-ed is not open bar, but it's, you know, the writer is pretty free to write what he wants. And so it's really based on the legitimacy, like what work have they done on the topic? It could be scholarly, it could be personal, it could be whatever, it could be just hard of experience. It could be also just timely, something happened to you and you can talk about it. Yeah, it's, again, it's nothing formalized. You just look at it. You just look at somebody's profile, what's in their past that gives them yeah, some form of legitimacy to write, and if they are within certain bounds, you can say like something like really outrageous, like that most people would find outrageous in our pages. You know, like some like you can explain the terrorist attacks that happened in France just on the basis of capitalism. It was just capitalism that explained everything that happened in Paris. We published pieces like that, which for me is pretty narrow and pretty silly, in fact. I think, but the person who wrote it is at some form of authority that made it possible, and you could guess that he was a post-structuralist intellectual, but whatever. Anna.
So you
oh, sorry.
Sorry, last thing, but I was wondering because you said newspapers are not there to build consensus; they're there to build an open debate. But like open debates lead to consensus. So if newspapers are there to build open debates, then it seems they are there to build consensus. So where in that am I going wrong?
No, I don't think that the newspaper are there to provide consensus. They provide an interpretation of things, but there are different newspapers, and you know, they compete with each other. These are all different worldviews, and they compete with each other. And you can use. I'm not sure that consensus is really like it used to be there. If you go into like, and some people interpret. There's been like. If you want to go into really theoretical aspect of it, like Habermas, for example, the German philosopher, based his whole theory of the debate on the quest for consensus. But a newspaper is just an element of public debate. It's not really immediately directed towards consensus. It's just a place where debate happens.
I would add that I mean, this is maybe the columnist in me, but if you think open debate leads to consensus, you have not been following the debates I've been following of late.
Well, great question. Thank you, Aidan, for pushing me.
Indeed. Anna?
Yeah, so a lot of the work that I've done has been writing the editorials that are run under the Crimson's institutional byline. So, by the Crimson editorial board, and I've enjoyed it a lot because it's you're basically getting to ghostwrite the voice of the Harvard undergraduate, but no one can pin you down and say like, Hannah, you're dumb. Like, why did you do this? So it's just been a really great place to grow as a writer. But I found when it comes to op-ed writing, unless I'm like cosmically compelled, like in an emotional sense, or figuring out when to insert myself is something that I think about a lot. And I think part of that is once your op-ed is published, like your name's on it, you can't change it. And I think I find that a bit stressful, but also just, I guess from both of your perspectives, how do you think about, I guess when you know that you have something like to write, like when you know that you would produce something like of value. So how do you identify? I know as a columnist it's a bit different because you always you always have something valuable to say. But I just, how do you guys approach that in your lines of work?
Well, I'll start because I do it all the time, and and I understand that very much. And often there are days I write because, again, I have to write, and I don't know whether it has any value, and I don't know what I'm going to say until we have 5 minutes. Well, I don't know what I'm going to say sometimes until I get to the end, and at that point, if it doesn't have value, I mean, it's very important first of all, well, you've got to have that spark of an idea. If you have a spark of an idea that tells you where you're going to end in a good place. And so most of my work is coming up with ideas and again, employing data and awareness and reporting and all that to get ideas, but also having an idea that's different. But then you work it through and then you go back and work it through again and, concentrate on the, all those things we've talked about before, and the lead and the kicker and all the technical elements of it. But usually I find that the more I work back through it, the more valuable it becomes.
And I would say that as an opinion writer, if you've managed to piss off everybody, sorry if it's rude, I don't know. Sometimes
You're good.
This is opinion writing, it's rude.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
but I just don't know if this stuff is rude. Anyway, if you manage to make everybody angry, that's great. You've done your job. This is like if you're getting 8 mail from every side,
great.
You've done your job. And yeah, that's what I would say. When I do that, I'm pretty happy with myself, even though it's a big city.
And when the people who think they really identify with you and your typical opinions, for instance, when they're mad at you, and they're usually way more mad than the people who you disagree with, then that's a victory itself. It's also, it's harder and harder in this day and age because we all get assaulted on Twitter and Facebook and everywhere else in the world, and it takes some getting used to. And I in college, I was editorial page editor too, and wrote those unsigned editorials, which, I go back and read now, and they have a completely different voice. They have an institutional voice that's appropriate for what they are. And so it was a little bit difficult for me to take that step too. But Marco can tell you, when I took that step, I maybe took it too far, but.
I would really love to hear about that because we're gone in 2 minutes, but go ahead.
No, I'm just going to put my email in the chat.
Yeah, I've put mine. So if ever you want to contact me, feel free to do it. And if you feel I can be useful in any way. And
thank you, bro.
And I feel also that sometimes the opinion pages forget to do some explanations because the public doesn't know, for example, like who is that person? Why is it important we felt that this person speak? And so sometimes the byline with an op-ed is just too short. We need to be better at explaining that stuff and to explaining why is that person relevant. So we have to go. thank you very much all for being there. It was really interesting to meet you all.
Yes, it was. Thank you for coming and good questions.
Thank you, both of you.
Thank you so much. Thanks for your time.
See you guys on the other side.